The jungle moon of Thalara was not a place humans visited often. Thick green clouds covered the sky, and strange animals roamed beneath the trees. The ground was always wet. The air smelled like sweet rot, and in the heart of the jungle stood the fortress of the Virith Huntresses, tall, strong alien women who ruled the land with sharp claws and sharper pride. Inside one of their dark stone cells sat a human. His name was Mason. He had been a scout for the Terran Union, flying a small ship over Thalara to collect data. But something had gone wrong. A pulse from the jungle had hit his ship, fried the engines, and sent him crashing into the trees. He woke up surrounded by towering alien warriors, each wearing armor made from bone and metal, their glowing eyes watching him like a creature in a cage. That had been 5 days ago. Now, Mason sat on a stone bench in Cell 9, deep inside the Huntresses' fortress. The walls were made of rough black rock. There was no window. A single vine torch burned outside the bars, casting flickering light into the room. The cell was empty except for him and a dish of cold roots the guards had left earlier. But Mason didn't complain. He didn't yell. He didn't cry for help. He sat with his back straight, arms resting on his knees, and his eyes focused on the door. He knew someone would come eventually, and he wanted to be ready. The Virith were confused by him. Usually, prisoners screamed, especially males. The Virith didn't treat males kindly in their world. Males had no real place except as servants or trophies. But this Mason was calm. Too calm, word began to spread among the warriors. The human prisoner didn't beg. He didn't try to escape. He just sat there like he was waiting for something. By the 6th day, the warriors were whispering about him during training. Some laughed, others frowned, and one of them became curious. Her name was Rika, known among the Huntresses as the Claw Queen. She had never lost a hunt. Her armor was painted with the marks of many battles. She was fierce, proud, and no male had ever held her attention. Until now. That evening, Rika walked down the stone corridor toward Cell 9. Her boots echoed. With every step, the guards straightened when they saw her. "I will speak with the human," she said. The guards did not argue. She stepped into the flickering light in front of the cell. Mason looked up slowly. His face showed no fear. "You are Rika," he said. His voice was even. She narrowed her eyes. "You know my name." "I've been listening," he said. "You lead many hunts. You command respect." She was silent for a moment. Then she pulled a curved blade from her belt and spun it through the air. The blade flashed like silver fire. "I could end you right now," she said. "You could," Mason said. "But you haven't." That made her pause. Rika was not used to this. Not from any male. Not from a prisoner. She had expected begging, trembling, or at least anger. But this human, he was different. She stepped closer to the bars. "Why do you sit so still, human? You are in a cage." "I'm still breathing," Mason said. "As long as I'm alive, I have a chance. Fear wastes energy." Rika tilted her head, studying him. She saw no armor on him, no claws, no weapons. But still, something about the way he sat made her hesitate. She felt like she was the one being watched. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want to understand why I'm still alive," he replied, "and maybe understand you." Rika let out a short laugh. It wasn't mocking, it was surprised. "I came to test you," she said. "But you test me instead." Then she turned and walked away without another word. Mason watched her go. Later that night, the guards talked in hushed voices. The Claw Queen stayed longer than usual. She didn't touch him. She even listened, and in Cell 9, Mason lay back on the stone bench, staring at the ceiling. He didn't know what would happen next. He was still a prisoner. He had no weapons, no friends, no way off this moon. But something had changed. For the first time, one of them saw him as more than just a weak outsider, and he was ready to use that. The next morning, Cell 9 was quiet as always. Mason sat on his usual spot, leaning against the wall. He had not slept much. His mind kept going back to the tall alien woman who had visited him last night. Rika, the Claw Queen. She had not threatened him with real anger. Her words had been strong, yes, but her eyes had shown curiosity. That gave Mason something to think about. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe she would come again. She did. Just before noon, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Again, heavy, firm steps. Mason knew who it was before she even appeared. Rika stood outside his cell, arms crossed. She wore the same bone and metal armor, but this time, her blade stayed at her side. Two guards followed behind her. Confused but silent, Mason stood up and nodded. You came back. I had questions, she said. Then asked. She looked at him, trying to read his face. Are all humans like you? Like me how? He asked. You speak calmly. You don't beg. You don't fight back. Mason smiled. Some humans scream, some fight, some stay quiet. I choose what helps me survive. Rika took a step closer. You confused my sisters. They expected you to cry. You did not. Why would I cry? Mason said. I'm still alive. That means I have a chance. Rika blinked slowly. Her fingers moved, tapping the hilt of her blade. She was thinking again. Suddenly, she pulled her weapon and spun it through the air. The sharp edge made a loud whistle as it passed close to the bars. Mason didn't move. The blade stopped just inches from his face. Still, he didn't blink. Rika narrowed her eyes. Not even a flinch. You would not harm someone who speaks with respect. Mason said, and you came here to talk, not kill. Rika lowered the blade. Then she stepped back. Strange human. She turned and left again. The guards whispered once more. Later that day, another huntress visited the corridor. Her name was Tara. Unlike Rika, she did not wear shining armor or carry a bright blade. Tara was quiet, almost like a shadow. Her weapons were thin and sharp, made for speed and silence. Tara was known as the Silent Blade. She had heard about the human from the guards. She didn't believe what she heard. No human male could be that calm. No one could face Rika and not shake with fear. So she came to see for herself. When Tara stepped in front of cell 9, Mason looked up. He saw a different figure now. This one moved softly, like wind. Her eyes were narrow and quiet. You are not Rika, Mason said. I am faster than Rika, she replied. Mason nodded. And quieter too. Tara raised one eyebrow. You speak like you are not afraid. Should I be? Tara did not answer. Instead, she opened the gate and stepped inside. The guard stepped forward. Unsure, I gave no order, she said without turning. They backed away. Now Mason was not just talking. He was sharing a space with one of the most dangerous huntresses on Thalara. Tara stood only a few feet from him. They say you are calm. I think it is an act. I'm just being myself. Mason said. Then prove it. She spun suddenly, aiming a quick strike toward his chest with her blade's flat side. Mason raised his arm and stepped back, avoiding the hit. She tried again. He stepped aside, not blocking, just moving. You do not fight like a warrior, she said. I'm not trying to fight. I'm trying to survive. Tara paused. Her breathing was calm. Her movement still. She had expected him to panic, to fall, to beg for mercy. Instead, he had simply avoided her attacks with careful steps. You are not what I expected. She said softly, and neither are you, Mason replied. You could have ended me in seconds. But you didn't. She stood still. Then, instead of leaving, she sat on the edge of the stone bench, just across from him. The guards blinked. No huntress had ever done that before. For the next hour, Tara said little. Mason asked questions, and she answered in short sentences. She spoke of the jungle, of the hunts, of the way the stars looked from the fortress roof, and she listened. Mason spoke of Earth, of cities full of lights, of people who build machines, to fly, to heal, to explore. He described oceans that stretched farther than sight, deserts with red sand, and forests where snow fell like feathers. Tara listened without interrupting. Finally, she stood up. You have strange stories, she said. They're true. I believe you. Then she left the cell without another word. That night, Mason sat quietly again, back against the wall. He was still behind bars. The walls had not changed. The jungle moon was still far from Earth, but something was happening. First Rika, then Tara. They were no longer visiting to mock or test him. They were coming because something about him didn't fit their world, and that made them curious. The guards now stared at him with a mix of respect and confusion. Even the torchlight outside his cell seemed a little brighter. He didn't know how long he would stay on Thalara. He didn't know if he would ever be free. But for now, he was no longer just a prisoner. He was someone the Huntresses wanted to understand. And that was more powerful than any weapon. The days on Thalara passed slowly. The jungle never slept. Strange birds called from the trees. The fortress was always alive with the sounds of boots, training, and sharp weapons clashing. Inside Cell 9, Mason sat as always, watching and waiting. But now, he was not just a forgotten prisoner. Something had changed. Warriors came by more often. Sometimes just to look. Some brought food. Others stood quietly and whispered to one another. The human had become a mystery. Rika had returned once. More, she didn't say much that time. She only sat by the bars and watched him speak about the stars. She said nothing but stayed longer than most of the guards expected. Then came Tara, the silent blade. She had already entered his cell once before. She had tested him. He had passed. But this time, she came without warning. It was night when Mason heard the soft steps. They made almost no sound. He looked up and saw Tara already standing inside the cell. The gate was open. The guards had not even noticed. "You walk like a shadow," Mason said. "I am one," she replied. She stood near the wall, her eyes on him. She didn't move closer, just stood and watched. Mason waited. He had learned not to rush their visits. These warriors did not like fast words or fake smiles. They respected quiet strength. "You returned," he said after a moment. "I did," Tara replied. "And I brought a question." Mason leaned forward. "What do you want to know?" She paused. "Why do you not hate us?" Mason blinked. "Why would I? You are in a cell. You were taken by force. Your ship is gone. Your people are far away." Mason nodded slowly. "All of that is true. But hate does nothing here. I don't hate you. I want to understand you." Tara stepped closer. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. "No one here has said that before. Not to me. Not like this." Mason gave a small smile. "Maybe that's why I'm still here." Tara sat down beside the wall. Her back leaned against the cold stone. She placed one of her thin blades on the floor beside her. It was a sign of trust. No huntress ever put down her blade inside a prisoner's cell. Mason didn't move. He understood the meaning of her action. He knew she was giving him a chance. They sat together in silence for a while. Then Tara said, "I was trained to end lives quickly. That is my skill. And yet you're here," Mason said, sharing words instead of wounds. Tara looked down at her hands. "It feels strange. I do not know what this feeling is. It might be peace," Mason said softly, "or maybe curiosity." She looked at him again. "You speak gently, even now, even after all this." "I was raised to speak before I act," he said. "Sometimes words can build bridges. Sometimes they can open doors." Tara looked at the cell bars. "You are still behind a door." Mason shrugged. "I don't mind, as long as the door doesn't close the heart." Tara looked at him for a long time. Her expression didn't change, but her voice became softer. "I think I will visit again," she said. "I'll be here," Mason replied. Tara picked up her blade, stood, and walked to the door. She looked back once before leaving. Then she disappeared into the shadows like she had never been there at all. The next morning, Mason woke up to a new sound. Voices. Arguing. To familiar voices. He stood and walked to the bars. Outside, in the hallway, Rika and Tara stood facing each other. Both wore full armor. Both held weapons, and both were clearly not pleased. "You enter his cell without telling me," Rika said sharply. "I did not answer to you," Tara replied. "He was my test, and now he is mine." Guards stood frozen nearby, unsure whether to stop the argument. Mason stepped forward. "Please," he said. "Don't fight over this." Both huntresses looked at him. It was strange to see such powerful warriors glance at a prisoner with respect. I didn't ask either of you to come, Mason said calmly. You came because you were curious. Not because of a challenge. Rika crossed her arms. She acts like you belong to her. I belong to no one, Mason said firmly. And neither do you. That quieted them. Tara looked at Rika. He speaks the truth. Rika lowered her arms slowly. Perhaps, but I still do not like the way you move around him. I move quietly, Tara said. That is what I do. You move like a thief. I steal nothing. Their eyes locked again. Mason stepped back. He knew enough not to say more right now. Rika turned to him. We are not used to this. We are not used to talking, to choosing peace. I know, Mason said. That's why I try. Rika said nothing more. She turned and walked away. Her steps were heavy, but she did not look back. Tara stayed for a moment longer. Then she, too, left. That night, Mason sat quietly again, thinking. Two powerful warriors had argued in front of his cell. Not about war, not about leadership, but about him. And it wasn't about control or ownership. It was something else. Something deeper. Respect. Maybe even something like care. He was still locked in cell 9. He still had no weapon, but he had something more powerful. Now. Influence. He was changing things. Not with force. But with calm words, with respect, with patience, and the fortress around him was beginning to feel a little less like a prison, and a little more like a choice. Mason sat alone in his cell, watching the slow movement of the jungle light outside the bars. The vine torch flickered gently, casting orange shadows on the rough stone walls. It had been many days since his capture, but things were different now. He was no longer ignored. Two of the strongest Virith Huntresses, Rika, the Claw Queen, and Tara, the Silent Blade, had visited him more than once. They had spoken with him, argued over him, and most importantly, they had started to listen. The guards now treated Mason with a strange kind of caution. They didn't throw his food on the ground anymore. They brought it in clean bowls and sometimes even nodded at him. Whispers filled the halls. Everyone had heard about the human in Cell 9. But what surprised Mason most came the next day. It began with a simple sound, soft footsteps. He looked up and saw Rika approaching again. But this time, she carried something in her hand. Food. Real food, not cold roots or dry grain, but warm jungle meat and fruits. Steam rose from the wooden bowl. Rika stood outside the bars and pushed the bowl toward him through the opening at the bottom of the door. I brought this, she said, looking slightly awkward. Mason stood up. Thank you. I hunted it myself. That makes it special. Rika crossed her arms. Don't make it a big thing. I won't, he said with a small smile. She sat down on the stone bench just outside the cell. Close enough to speak, but not inside. As Mason ate, she asked him questions. About human food. About earth animals. About how humans choose their leaders. He answered with care, explaining without pride or fear. Just facts, stories, and sometimes a little humor. Later, when Rika stood to leave, she looked back. Tomorrow, she said. I'll bring something else. Mason nodded. I'll be here. That night, the fire outside his cell was replaced with a brighter one. A small energy lamp, brought by one of the guards, who claimed it was by order. Mason knew it wasn't. From the guards, Rika had made sure he had more light, more warmth. The next evening, something even more surprising happened. Tara arrived, but she didn't come alone. She brought a folded mat, 2 extra bowls, and a piece of cloth covered in herbs and jungle spices. When she reached the cell, she saw Rika already sitting in her usual place. The air grew tense for a moment. Tara raised her eyebrow. You're early. Rika didn't move. You're late. Mason sighed. You both can stay. Tara stepped closer. I didn't ask permission. I wasn't giving it, Mason said with a smile. But I welcome both of you. Rika frowned. Tara gave a short nod, without another word. Tara laid out the mat just outside the cell and sat. The 3 of them sat around the bars, like people sitting around a campfire. Mason spoke about the moon. The human one, not Thalora. He told them how children looked up at it on Earth and dreamed. He described how it shined over oceans and deserts, how songs had been written about it. Rika listened with narrowed eyes, as if she were trying to picture a quiet Earth night. Tara asked few questions, but she paid close attention to every word. The firelight danced between them. It was the strangest thing Mason had ever felt. He was in a prison, on a jungle moon, surrounded by alien warriors who once saw him as nothing. But now they sat with him, they listened, and they brought him food, warmth, and something else, something rare. Respect. The next day brought more changes. 3 younger huntresses stood outside his cell in the morning. They didn't speak. They just looked inside, curious. Mason greeted them politely. They said nothing. But they returned the next day. By the 4th day, more huntresses came to listen. Some stood outside, while others sat near the wall. One even asked Mason to repeat a story he had told the day before. It became a daily gathering. Every evening, a group would arrive, sometimes Rika, sometimes Tara, sometimes both, and slowly more joined. They brought food, shared their own stories, and for a short time each night, Cell 9 turned into something that felt like a small village around a fire. Even the guards stopped watching so closely. Mason never left the cell, but it didn't feel like a cage anymore. One evening, Tara brought a strange musical tool made from bone and vine. She handed it to Mason. "Can you use this?" she asked. "I can try," he said. He held it carefully and blew through it. The sound was low and soft, like wind through a cave. Rika laughed, not mocking, just surprised. "You made it sound like a crying beast," she said. "I'll get better," Mason replied. They all laughed. The sound of laughter in Cell 9 was something no one expected. But peace does not last forever. At the end of the week, a new voice arrived. It came from behind the crowd. Deep, cold, angry. "What is this foolish gathering?" The huntresses turned. Even Rika and Tara stood up. A tall warrior stepped forward. She wore black armor and had red markings on her shoulders. Her face was serious, and her eyes burned like fire. Her name was Vale. She was the matriarch's enforcer, a warrior who ended fights with one move, one of the few feared by even Rika. Vale stepped through the crowd and looked at Mason. "This is the human they whisper about?" No one answered. Vale looked at Rika, then at Tara. "You waste time on this soft creature." Mason stood up calmly. He faced her without fear. "My name is Mason," he said, "and I am not soft." Vale's eyes narrowed. "I will see for myself," she said. Then she turned and walked away, her boots shaking the floor with each step. Tara looked at Mason. "Be ready," Rika added. "She does not test with words." Mason looked through the bars. "I'll do what I always do." Tara tilted her head. "And what is that?" "Stay calm, stay human." The fortress was quieter than usual the next morning. Even the jungle outside seemed to hold its breath. Word had spread fast. Vale, the strongest enforcer of the Virith, was coming to test the human in Cell 9. Mason sat calmly, just like every other morning. But deep inside, he knew this visit would not be like the others. Vale was not like Rika or Tara. She did not visit to talk or to listen. She came only when she wanted control. He had seen her once before, long ago on his first day. Her armor had been darker than the others. Her eyes had been colder. Now, she was returning not with curiosity, but with judgment. The hallway grew quiet. Then came the sound of metal boots, slow and heavy. Vale appeared at the edge of the hallway. Behind her stood Rika and Tara. Both wore full armor. Their faces were serious. They had tried to speak to Vale earlier, but she had not listened. Vale did not care for talk. She only respected power. Mason stood up. Vale stopped just outside the cell and looked at him through the bars. "So," she said, her voice low and firm, "you are the reason warriors stopped training. The reason huntresses gathered to share food with a caged outsider. I didn't ask anyone to come." Mason replied, "You didn't have to. They came like fools." Rika stepped forward. "He is not a fool, and he is not weak." Vale turned to her. "You speak as if he is one of us." Tara added quietly, "He has earned our respect." Vale's eyes burned brighter. "Respect is not given, It is taken. She turned to the guard. Open the cell. The guard hesitated. He has no weapon. There is no danger. I said open it. The gate creaked as it unlocked. Val stepped inside. Rika moved forward. He is not ready. Mason raised his hand. It's all right. Let her see for herself. The cell door closed behind Val. She looked at Mason like a hunter watching. Pray, you will defend yourself, she said. I don't want to fight, Mason said. You have no choice. She took a step forward. Mason didn't move. Val's hand flew out, striking toward his chest not with a blade, but with force. It was a test, a push. A strike made to see if he would fall. He stepped back just enough to avoid it. She struck. Again, this time, Mason raised his arm and blocked it not hard, just enough to guide it away. He didn't hit back. He didn't shout. He stayed steady. Val narrowed her eyes. You do not strike. You do not fall. What kind of warrior are you? I'm not a warrior, Mason said, but I'm not weak either. Val raised her leg for a sweep. Mason moved with it, letting his foot slide instead of resisting. She tried again. Mason ducked under a strike and stepped aside each time. He avoided her attacks without countering. He used only balance and movement outside. The cell, Huntresses had gathered. More than 10 stood watching now. The guards, too. All silent. All focused. Val growled and swung one more time. Mason caught her wrist not with power, but with steady hands. He held it there, gently but firmly. For 1 second, they stood frozen. Then he let go and stepped back. You seen what you came to see, he said. Val stared at him. Then, slowly, she lowered her arm. You do not fight to win. She said. No, Mason said. I fight to understand. For the first time, Val's face changed. Her eyes softened just a little. She looked at the crowd outside the cell, then back at Mason. You are not like us, she said. I never claimed to be. She gave a small nod. But you are not weak either. Val turned and walked out of the cell. The crowd opened for her as she passed. Rika stepped inside next. You're not hurt? She asked. No, Mason said. She didn't really want to hurt me. She wanted to test who I am. Tara stood beside her. And you passed? Mason sat back down on the bench. I didn't win anything. Rika gave a small smile. You earned something greater? Tara nodded. Now even Val knows. That evening, something strange happened. The cell door was left open. Only for a moment, but long enough for Mason to see that trust had begun to grow. He didn't step out. He didn't need to. That night, the firelight outside his cell was brighter. Rika brought meat again, freshly cooked. Tara brought a cloth mat and laid it neatly by the wall. Even Val returned not to fight, but to sit quietly and listen. The small space around Cell 9 once again became like a campfire. This time, even more Huntresses gathered. Mason told no stories that night. Instead, the Huntresses shared theirs. Rika spoke of her first hunt. Tara shared how she learned silence from the jungle. Val talked about her first battle, how fear had almost broken her. And they listened to each other. And they laughed. It was something new. By the end of the night, Mason looked at each of them. Ika.Tera.Val. And all the others who sat nearby. He had not escaped his cell. But he had changed what the cell meant. It was no longer a place for punishment. It had become a place of peace. Days passed, and the cell that once held silence now echoed with voices, laughter, and stories. Cell 9 was still surrounded by stone walls, but it no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a meeting place, a peaceful corner inside a fortress. Built for war, Mason sat at the center of it all. He had no armor, no weapons, and no status. But the Huntresses listened to him. Rika respected him. Tara trusted him. Even Val, the coldest of them all, had begun to nod when he spoke. But not everyone was pleased. Not all Huntresses liked the change. Some believed Mason was weakening their way. They thought speaking with a male prisoner, laughing with him, and sharing food had made the warriors soft. One such Huntress was Dara, a rising fighter who admired Val but hated Mason's growing influence. He sits behind bars and makes our strongest forget who they are, she said to others. Yes, no blade, no strength, only words. Rika overheard this once and warned Mason. Dara may come. She wants to prove something. Mason nodded. Let her come. I have nothing to hide. That evening, the light was softer than usual. A light rain tapped the stones outside the fortress. Inside the hallway near cell 9, Huntresses gathered again. Sitting quietly on the floor, expecting another peaceful night, Mason sat cross-legged, telling a story about Earth's mountains, giant peaks covered in white snow, untouched by war. The listeners imagined the scene, some closing their eyes as he described cold winds and quiet skies. Then footsteps interrupted the mood. Heavy, fast, angry, Dara stormed down the hallway, her armor shining, her eyes sharp with pride and challenge. Everyone turned. Rika stood up. Why are you here? I'm here to fix what you broke, Dara said. The fortress is not a place for stories. It is a place for strength. Tara stepped beside Rika. This is not the time for a fight. Dara pointed at Mason. Then, take your pet and keep him hidden. He turns warriors into listeners. He makes leaders sit on floors like children. Mason stood up slowly. You don't know me. I know you're weak, Dara replied, and I will show them all. Without asking permission, she entered the cell. Gasps filled the hallway. Vale moved forward, ready to stop her, but Mason raised a hand. It's fine, he said. Let her do what she came for. Dara pulled her blade, but Mason didn't move. She took a step forward. Still, he stood calmly. You won't even try to defend yourself, she asked. I don't need to, Mason said. She raised her weapon, and then he sat down, right on the bench, calm, silent. Dara paused. What are you doing? You came to fight me, Mason said. But I'm not your enemy, she blinked. Confused. You want to prove you're stronger? He asked. Fine, you win. But what do you gain? What will it prove? She tightened her grip on the blade. I can't stop you from hurting me, Mason said. But if you think hurting someone brings honor, then you've already lost. His voice stayed soft, but his words hit harder than any weapon. Dara stepped back. Everyone watching grew silent. Even Vale looked surprised. Mason looked into Dara's eyes. You came to fight a man with no weapon, no armor, no training, and yet you say you're strong? No. True strength is knowing when to hold back, knowing when peace is better than pride. Dara's hand trembled. Then, without warning, she dropped the blade. It clattered on the stone. She looked around and saw the others watching. Not with fear, but with quiet respect for Mason, and silent disappointment in her. Dara turned and walked out of the cell. She didn't say another word. That night, no one spoke for a while. The firelight danced gently on the walls. The rain outside fell harder. But inside cell 9, it felt still. Finally, Rika broke the silence. You stopped her without lifting a hand. I didn't stop her, Mason said. She stopped herself. Tara looked at him. Why didn't you fight? Mason gave a small smile. Because this isn't about winning. It's about showing a better way. Vale nodded slowly. That was more powerful than any blade. One by one, the Huntresses sat again. This time, it was not just to listen. They came to learn. Later that night, after everyone had gone, Rika stayed behind. She stood by the cell door and watched Mason. You could have been hurt. Yes, Mason said. But pain passes. What matters is the message. She looked down at the floor. Many Huntresses feared change, but some now believe in you, not in me, Mason said. And the idea that strength doesn't always mean violence. Rika looked up. You speak like a leader. Mason shook his head. I'm just a man trying to survive. She opened the cell gate, not just a little, all the way. You're not a prisoner anymore, she said. Mason looked at the open door. He stepped to the edge, but didn't walk out. I'll wait here, he said, until they're ready. I don't want to leave. I want to be accepted. Rika smiled. You already are. The fortress was never quiet. Somewhere, footsteps always echoed or steel clashed in training yards. But now something different filled the halls. A sense of peace. It started from one cell, Cell 9, where a human prisoner had done what no warrior ever had. He changed the minds of huntresses, not with fear, not with power, but with words, with patience, with kindness. Mason had been given a choice. Rika had opened his gate. He could walk free inside the fortress, but he stayed. Mason still woke early each day. He swept his small cell. He shared food with the guards and cleaned his clothes by hand. Even though his cell was no longer locked, he treated it with care. When huntresses passed by, they nodded to him, some waved, others brought fruits or sat to listen. Tara would laugh at his stories. Vale, though still quiet, began asking questions. About Earth. Why did your people climb mountains? She once asked. To see what was on the other side, Mason answered. And what did they find? More mountains. She thought for a moment, and still, they climbed. Mason smiled. Yes, that's what we do. News of Mason's influence reached the matron, the highest commander of the fortress. She had never visited Cell 9. She saw Mason as just a captured male. But now even her strongest warriors had changed. They smiled more. They listened more. They trained differently. Not softer but smarter. Finally, the matron called for Mason. Rika came to the cell. She wants to see you. Mason stood. All right, let's go. The path to the matron's chamber was long. High walls, dark banners. Armed guards stood with spears, watching every step inside the hall. The matron sat on a high stone seat. Her eyes were sharp, and her voice cut through silence. You are the human. Mason bowed his head slightly. Yes, you changed my warriors. Why? I didn't change them, Mason said. They changed themselves. I only gave them a different choice. You are a prisoner. I was. Then why stay? The door was open. Because I found something here. People worth understanding. The matron studied him. She was not used to words like his. She was used to orders, obedience, strength. But now her warriors followed Mason's ideas. You speak as if you lead, she said. I don't lead, Mason answered. I just care. That answer stayed with her. A few days later, the matron returned to Cell 9. This time, she came alone. I watched you, she said. You never asked to leave. You never begged. Why? Because freedom is not about running, Mason said. It's about living right, wherever you are. She looked around the cell. It was clean, neat, quiet. This place was built to hold enemies, she said. But now it holds peace. She stepped closer. You do not belong in this cell anymore. Mason looked at her. Then what do you want me to do? The matron nodded. I want you to teach. The next morning, the training ground was full. Huntresses lined up in rows, holding staffs and blades. But this time, they were not there to spar. They were there to listen. Mason stood before them, wearing simple clothes. He had no armor, no title, just calm eyes and steady words. Strength isn't only in the arm, he said. It's in the mind and the heart. When you understand your enemy, you are already ahead. He walked slowly between the lines. A true warrior knows when to strike and when not to. Some looked confused. Others nodded. He continued. You were raised to fight. But what happens after the battle? Who will build? Who will lead with care? One huntress raised her hand. Are you saying we stop fighting? No, Mason said. I'm saying fight for something better. In the weeks that followed, changes spread across the fortress. Huntresses still trained hard. But they also sat together in groups, talking about ideas. Some learned how to grow food. Others repaired walls, not with commands, but teamwork. And in the middle of it all was Mason. He still lived in Cell 9. But it was no longer a prison. It was a place of wisdom. Even warriors from other districts began visiting. Rika often stayed nearby, helping him guide discussions. Tara made jokes to break tension. Vale stood guard, but smiled more than before. Even Dara, the once angry challenger, began bringing scrolls for Mason to read. One day, during sunset, the matron visited again. She found Mason in the garden near the wall, showing to younger huntresses how to grow vines for food. You built something here, she said. Mason looked up. Not alone. She nodded. No, But without you, none of this begins. She walked beside him. We once captured you in battle, she said. But now I wonder, did we capture you, or did we set ourselves free? Mason smiled. Maybe both. The matron paused, then asked, if I told you that you are free to leave now, to return to Earth, would you go? Mason looked up at the sky. He thought of Earth, the Force, the oceans, the people, but he also thought of Rika, Tara, Vale, the others. I miss my world, he said, but I have work here. That night, Rika stood by the open gate of Cell 9. She looked at him. The galaxy is big. You could go anywhere. Mason looked at the sky beyond the stone walls. Then at her. Yes, he said, but I've already found where I belong, and for the first time since he had arrived. Mason stepped out of the cell not as a prisoner, but as one of them, a human among warriors, a voice of peace among fighters, and a reminder that sometimes the strongest change comes not through force, but through understanding.